The immediate impact of the BLM protests, as we know, was a massive spike in crime, murder primarily, of loss of Black lives overwhelmingly. Do you find there's some irony that Black Lives Matter clearly cost Black lives in rather large numbers? As well as turning out to be a fundamentally corrupt organization?
I think that it is a really trollish question to kind of deflect from questions about police violence. You know, what about to this kind of like, what about Black on Black crime? What I would say is,
I didn't say anything about that.
What do you mean when you talk about, you know, this kind of?
I'm saying that when the police stood back.
Right, when the police stood back. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, you know, you kind of had
murder took off.
Yes.
So the utopian vision led to hell for a lot of people. Not the white people, but Black people in urban centers that were by hideous crime levels and murder rates.
Can we, because I don't have these numbers at my fingertips, but I don't think that there was that much of a difference in the crime spike in cities that were ruled by or governed by the left versus, you know, cities where you had conservative mayors.
Generally, the atmosphere. I think there's a bunch of factors involved. But
there's a lot of right. I mean, I think that again,
one of the factors was we know that the cost was borne by African Americans, largely poor in urban centers, who died in large numbers.
What do you mean large numbers? How many people are we talking about?
I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but we saw a historic spike in murder rates in this country alone, of all the countries that were going through an epidemic, and most of it occurring after the death. After the BLM protests. Now, it does strike me that a movement that says it wants to save Black lives that ends up costing Black lives has something to answer for. And that's not trollish. These are people who are killed. Is it trollish to mention the crime levels, the murder levels that are happening in those neighborhoods?
I think it's cruel. I don't think that you can...
We're not allowed to talk about that?
Of course. You're allowed to talk about whatever you want. It's your podcast.
I know, but I'm just, is there are we not allowed to say it's a problem?
Who has possibly said that it's not a problem?
I said it was trollish to ask.
I think it's trollish to use that as a cudgel against racial justice protests, to say that then because we had this moment of like, I mean, there has been so much social disorder and social entropy in the United States post-pandemic that I don't think you can. I think that there's maybe a causal relationship, you know, like you saw in New York with basically a kind of almost a police strike, right? Police saying, well, we're not going to. They were on the one hand, you know, kind of rounding up a lot of protesters, but they were also, you know, sort of sitting back when there was a lot of looting going on. And you had people who coming from all over the place to loot, who, you know, kind of, that was much more, I think, a crime of opportunity than a crime.
That always happens.
That always happens. So yes, I think you can absolutely say that like the disadvantaged bear the brunt of disorder, and that and this is actually, I mean, if we're going to bring this conversation back around to Kamala Harris, I mean, this is something I think that Kamala Harris writes in her first book about how, you know, safety is a precondition for reform, because you kind of can't reform, you know, this like you first people need to feel safe, and then you can talk about ways to reform injustice. But I would also say, I mean, something we've seen, wait, can I just say something really quick?
Yeah.
Like, so do you blame Black Lives Matter for the huge increase in like traffic deaths and people driving like maniacs, which has been really well documented since the pandemic?
I think to some extent, yes.
Why?
Because policing stood back. They knew police were told, if you arrest people, if you arrest African Americans, you will bear a cost. They took that message, stood back. We happened to see a big increase in traffic accidents. We also see a big increase in crime. Now, it seems to me if Harris believed that safety is a precondition of everything, she would not have actually encouraged this gone on television and said, this stuff is going to continue until you solve this. She said that the day after the worst riots in that period. I double checked it. So she showed an absolute insouciance towards the violence and dangerousness of these cities because she wanted to exploit it for political purposes.